Thanks, Chair. Minister, I know and I appreciate the fact that you visited the service. I think 2017. It was actually January 2017, if I remember correctly, and it was very much appreciated that you took the time to go down and see the service. It covers a huge area, the whole of Carlow and the whole of Kilkenny. In fact, there's an argument there that Carlow actually should have its own women's refuge. It currently doesn't, and for various reasons, like family reasons, women in Carlow should be able to stay in Carlow. But the question, I suppose, is specific in relation to the council and budget, because to date, Amber have been running fantastic. I just can't say enough good things about the service that they run, and a lot of it, obviously, you're not going to come from a domestic violence situation and wake up one morning and everything is okay again. You have to go through a whole process, and counselling is a key part of that. And obviously for children who have been affected and living in a domestic and abusive situation, they need counselling, which is often in the form of play therapy. And currently that is actually coming from a charitable organisation. There's no ring-fenced, I know they get funding from TUSLA, but there's no ring-fenced funding for counselling.
Another opportunity, Minister.
Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thanks very much, Deputy. May I first say, just in terms of the need within Carlow Kilkenny that you've identified as well, one of the precise recommendations that I made to TUSLA as being taken up is that for the hiring of some additional outreach support workers by refuges throughout the country. I recommended this because I met with domestic sexual and violence-based services from representatives from around the country and say, what, especially outside of the main urban settings, what would you recommend? Should the women go to your service or the service go to the women? And they suggested outreach workers. Carlow Kilkenny has already hired an additional one out of the 12 that have provided money for. And my understanding is that there is in process the hiring of a second outreach worker. So I think it's really important to say that there are additional resources going on in relation to that. I'll pause and come back to the other question at the end.
Thanks. Minister, I actually was speaking to them today, and I think that second outreach worker was just finalised only yesterday or today, which is good and it is welcome. So, and that is to service Carlow, because obviously you have a lot of people who have to travel and schools, and it's not an ideal situation. But I suppose part of the reason for the question as well is that services that are dealing with domestic violence are often asked to do these not cost analysis, they're asked to do like a needs analysis of what they actually need, and they spend a huge amount of time and take it very seriously, and then it seems like 2 years later they're still waiting on an answer or waiting on those additional resources. So in fairness, there was one granted just either I think yesterday or today, which is coincidental, but it's good news. But just to say that specific on the counsel and the play therapy, because it's so valuable, and you can't flee a domestic violence situation. You will keep returning to that if you don't have the proper supports, and counselling is key to that. And it's just, at the moment, it is a voluntary charity that's providing that for them, and if that runs out, which it will at the end of this year, it puts the whole counselling budget in jeopardy, and that's such a vital part of the work that they do.
May I say the two things in relation to that? The specific issue of counselling is that thank you for raising it. You've put it on the record. TUSLA is hearing, will be aware of that. Excuse me, and I hope and anticipate that it is part of their negotiations, especially for 2020, to see, is there any more scope for supporting that particular aspect. Though my information is that they haven't, they haven't raised the issue of counselling and additional resources for counselling on an ongoing basis. That's just my information, but I certainly hear that you are raising that. Secondly, in relation to the children, again in 2019, this is one of the ways we spent some of the additional money. TUSLA began to roll out what's called the TLC Kids program, where it's a healing program for children in a number of TUSLA areas for children who witnessed domestic violence. A facilitator training to support the rollout was delivered in March and September of 2019. Very high levels of interest and participation. And my understanding is that the actual provision of that is coming to Kilkenny in the early part of the year in January. The final thing just to say is in terms of the second outreach worker, no, I didn't have that information. I'm very happy to hear that. I think that recruitment process took longer than anticipated, but it's good to know they have two in place.
Thank you, Minister. Moving on.